Welcome back, travelers. We've reached the final chapter of this ancient tale, the quiet after the storm, the fading echoes of heroes and kings. Tonight, we step into part 3, the resolution where the Trojan War meets its sorrowful end and its survivors begin new journeys into legend. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight? Tell us your city or country in the comments. And if you've been enjoying this series, whether you listen to relax, to sleep, or simply for the love of mythology, please like this video and subscribe. Your support helps bring more ancient tales to life. Now, let your breathing slow. Let the world around you fade. The fires of Troy have dimmed, the final heroes have fallen, and new destinies wait beyond the ashes. This is the resolution, the wanderings of survivors, the weight of victory, the beginning of legends yet to come. Settle in, close your eyes, and let the final chapter begin. The resolution. Chapter 33. The last days of Achilles. The truce ended, and battle returned like a tide. But now, something was different. Achilles fought not like a man seeking glory, but like one fulfilling the final measures of fate. He moved through Trojan ranks with terrible purpose. No waste, no flourish, only deadly intent. Mothers whispered warnings to their children. Do not look upon Achilles. If you see him, run. Inside Troy, even those who hated him spoke his name like a storm cloud forming. His presence hung over the city, heavy and inevitable. But prophecy had not lied. Achilles would not see Troy fall. One day, under a blazing sun, Achilles drove the Trojans back toward their walls. Dust rose around him, forming a halo of earth and fire. On the battlement stood Paris, not brave like Hector, but desperate, bitter, guided by gods who had not forgotten their grudges. He drew a bow. Beside him, unseen, Apollo lifted the arrow, guiding its flight with divine precision. Achilles strode across the field, unstoppable, unaware. Paris loosed the arrow. It flashed in the sunlight. It struck Achilles in the heel, the one place Thetis's protective touch had not reached. A crack of pain split through him. His leg buckled. He fell, bronze clattering against the earth. He tried to rise, but the wound's venom and prophecy held him fast. Around him, Greeks shouted in shock, rushing to protect their fallen hero. Achilles' sight dimmed. He thought of Patroclus, of Thetis, of Peleus waiting in distant Phthia. So this is the choice, he whispered. Greeks formed a ring around Achilles' body, fighting with desperate ferocity. Ajax towered above him, shield raised, batting aside Trojan spears like flies. The Trojans pressed forward, eager to seize the corpse as a prize. But Ajax did not yield. He would rather crumble beneath the weight of 1,000 blows than let Achilles' body be taken. In the end, the Greeks carried him back to camp, his armor gone, his body broken, but surrounded by honor and grief. Achilles did not live to see Troy burn, but Troy would not have burned without him. His funeral pyre rose beside Patroclus's, twin flames marking the war's highest and darkest point. Chapter 34. Prophecies unfinished. With Achilles gone, the war sagged, under a strange heaviness. Their sharpest spear had fallen. Troy's strongest shield, Hector, was gone as well. And still the walls stood. Whispers of prophecy surfaced again. Troy could not fall until 3 conditions were met. The bow and arrows of Heracles must be brought. Achilles' own blood, his son, must fight. And the Palladium, the sacred statue of Athena in Troy, must be stolen. Heracles' bow belonged to Philoctetes, the archer abandoned years earlier on Lemnos with a festering snakebite. Achilles' son, Neoptolemus, still lived in distant Skyros. And the Palladium was hidden deep within Troy's walls. Odysseus recognized these signs. Strength had failed. Strategy would finish what force could not. Chapter 35. The Island of Philoctetes. Odysseus sailed with a small crew to the barren island of Lemnos. There they found Philoctetes gaunt, furious, living among rocks and wind. His foot still oozed from the ancient venom. His beard hung wild. His eyes burned with years of abandonment. When he saw Odysseus, he laughed, a jagged, broken sound. "You remember me now?" he spat. "Does your war need a cripple at last?" Odysseus tried diplomacy. "We wronged you," he admitted. "The war has lasted 10 years. The seers say we cannot win without your bow." Philoctetes lifted the weapon. "Heracles gave me this," he said, "for loyalty. Why should I give it to oath-breakers?" Odysseus faltered, so he tried something else. He brought forth Neoptolemus, Achilles' son, strong and honest-eyed. Neoptolemus attempted deception at first, as Odysseus instructed, but the lies soured on his tongue. Finally, he confessed, "We abandoned you. It was wrong, but the war needs you. Heracles' legacy needs you. Help us not for Agamemnon, not for Odysseus, for your own honor." Philoctetes studied him long and silently. "You are Achilles' son," he said. "I see his fire." Then, after a long breath, bitterness began to melt. A vision, some say from Heracles himself, urged him to go. "Very well," he said. "I will come. For my honor, for Heracles, and for you, boy." For the first time in years, he walked toward a ship. Chapter 36. The First Arrow of the End. When Philoctetes returned to the Greek camp, warriors stared as if seeing a ghost. Some turned away in shame. Others watched with newfound hope. He said nothing. He simply sat in council with Heracles' bow resting across his knees. The plan was simple. Draw Paris out. One Trojan still shone despite Hector's absence. Paris, the shepherd prince whose choices had sparked the entire war. The Greeks formed their lines. The Trojans answered. Paris stepped forward, bow in hand, scanning the field for another victim. Perhaps another Achilles. He never saw the arrow. Philoctetes drew the bowstring pane, shooting through his scarred foot, and loosed. The arrow flew with the weight of destiny and a decade of suffering. It struck Paris deep. He crumpled, screaming, clutching the wound that no healer would ever cure. His body, like Philoctetes' old injury, began to rot from within. Carried back into Troy, he lingered for days, but death was certain. Aphrodite's golden promise unraveled. Helen's fate twisted once more, and the war's wheel turned again. But Troy still stood. Its walls were intact, and the Palladium still watched from its hidden chamber. Chapter 37. Theft in the Night. Odysseus and Diomedes prepared for the most dangerous task of all, infiltrating Troy itself. Disguised and cloaked in shadow, they slipped through alleys and past guards on a moonless night. They reached the temple where the Palladium rested. The air felt thick with ancient power. The statue, simple, stiff, wide-eyed, seemed to stare right through them. For a moment, even Odysseus hesitated. This small, ancient statue had stood in Troy longer than any living man. Generations had prayed to it, trusted it, built their courage on its unblinking gaze. But the war had eaten too much to stop now. "We must," Diomedes whispered. Odysseus nodded. Together, they lifted the Palladium. The air in the temple seemed to shudder, as if they had pulled a peg from the frame of the world. Statue in hand, they slipped back into the night. Every creak of leather, every scrape of sandal on stone sounded thunder loud in their ears. Twice, they froze as patrols passed near, hearts pounding, but the shadows held them. They passed through Troy's gate unseen, crossed the plain, and reached the Greek camp before dawn. When the sun rose, the Palladium, Troy's secret heart, stood among the Greeks. Inside the city, priests would soon discover the loss. An invisible pillar had been pulled from the city's soul. Chapter 38. The Idea of the Horse. Still, the walls stood. Siege engines, courage, prophecy, all had brought the Greeks close, but not through. Odysseus knew brute force had reached its limit. Something stranger was needed. "What if we stop trying to break the walls," he said in council, "and make the Trojans open the gates themselves?" Murmurs stirred. "We pretend to leave," Odysseus continued. "We burn our camp, sail away just out of sight. But first, we leave them a gift." "What kind of gift?" Nestor asked. "A horse," Odysseus said. "Huge, beautiful, hollow." He outlined his idea. A wooden horse, large enough to impress, built hollow to hide chosen warriors inside. The rest of the Greeks would depart, making a show of defeat, then return by night once the Trojans had dragged the horse into their city. "Will they accept it?" someone asked. "They will want to," Odysseus replied, "and wanting can drown out wisdom." It was desperate. It was audacious. It was their best hope. Reluctantly, the kings agreed. Chapter 39. The Wooden Giant. On the beach, carpenters began their work. Trees fell, beams rose. A skeleton of timber took shape, then grew flesh as planks clad its sides. Slowly, a giant horse emerged head high, ears pricked, legs planted like pillars. Inside, the builders left a hollow belly, accessible by a hidden hatch. Odysseus chose his companions carefully. Warriors strong, disciplined, and patient enough to endure hours of cramped darkness. Menelaus, Neoptolemus, Diomedes, others whose names would someday be spoken in later tales. They carried only what they needed: short swords, light shields, the will to hold their breath while the world shifted around them. Meanwhile, the army prepared its stage. Tents were dismantled or set alight. Goods were loaded onto ships. Smoke rose in great plumes as if the very camp burned itself from the earth. From Troy's walls, watchers squinted at the astonishing sight. "They are leaving," someone cried. "Look, their tents burn. Their ships depart." The Greek fleet moved out, oars chopping the sea. They vanished behind a nearby island, out of sight but not truly gone. On the emptied shore, the horse remained, a towering, silent presence. Chapter 40. Voices at the Gate. Curiosity drew the Trojans down from their walls. They approached the abandoned camp, cautiously shields ready, spears lowered. No ambush sprang. They roamed through ashes and debris, disbelief turning to cautious delight. "The Greeks are gone," they whispered. "After 10 years, they're gone." Then they saw it. The horse. It loomed over the beach, larger than any beast, too perfect to be practical. The Trojans gathered around it, marveling. "What is it?" "An offering," some said. "A gift to Athena." The Greeks knew they angered her. "This is a plea for safe passage home." "Or a trick," others muttered darkly. Laocoon, priest of Apollo, strode forward, eyes narrowed. He did not like it. He walked around the horse, struck its flank with his hand, listening. Then, seizing a spear, he hurled it into the wooden side. The impact boomed. For a heartbeat, those close enough thought they heard a faint, muffled vibration from within. Laocoon's suspicion flared. "Fools!" he cried. "Do you not see this reeks of deceit? I fear the Greeks even when they bear gifts." His words rattled the crowd. Some nodded. Others, exhausted by years of fear, clung to hope instead. Then the sea rose against him. 2 great serpents emerged from the waves, coiling, scaling, their eyes burning with unnatural fire. They raced up the shore. People screamed and scattered. The serpents wrapped themselves around Laocoon and his sons, crushing, biting. Their screams tore at the sky before cutting off abruptly. The beasts slid away toward the city and vanished near Athena's temple. Stunned Trojans stared in horror. "Look," some whispered. "He struck the horse, and the gods punished him." Caution twisted into fear. Fear softened into justification. "It must be sacred," they insisted. "We must honor it, not destroy it." Cassandra cried out that ruin would follow, but as always, no one believed her. In the end, hope and superstition triumphed over warning. "Bring the horse into the city," the people shouted. "Let it be a sign of our victory." They fastened ropes and harnessed teams of men and beasts. With straining backs and chanting voices, they dragged the horse up to the gate. It scraped the stone as it passed, sparks of omen no one wished to read. Inside the walls, they hauled it to a central square. Children ran in circles around its legs. Elders touched the wood reverently. Priests muttered prayers to Athena. That night, Troy celebrated. The war was over, they thought. Wine flowed freely. Music wound through streets, once echoing only with cries of fear. People danced beneath the looming shadow of the horse. Slowly, the revelry faded into exhausted sleep. Torches guttered. Doors shut. Even sentries on the walls relaxed, heavy-lidded after a rare taste of relief. Inside the horse, it was hot, dark, and airless. Odysseus and the chosen warriors endured in cramped silence, muscles cramping, armor biting into flesh. They listened as the city's noise swelled, peaked, and then faded. At last, night grew deep and quiet. Odysseus strained his ears, heard only the soft hush of wind in streets, the distant creak of wood. "It's time," he whispered. They worked the hidden hatch open. Cool night air flooded in, carrying the scent of smoke and sleeping stone. One by one, they slid down to the ground, blades ready, hearts hammering. The horse towered above them like a dark god watching its own trick unfold. They moved toward the nearest gate, shadows among shadows. Guards dozed. The Greeks killed them swiftly, silently, and pulled the gates open. Far off, the hidden Greek fleet saw a flicker of signal fire. Oars bit into black water. Sails swelled. The ships returned. Chapter 42. The Fall of Troy. Troy woke to fire. Greek warriors surged through the opened gates and spilled into the streets like a flood of iron and flame. Houses were torched, doors splintered. Men died half awake, dragged from beds by hands that had once seemed far away. Cries of panic split the night. The Greeks! The Greeks! Some rushed to arm themselves, only to find armor scattered, weapons lost, ranks in chaos. The attackers moved with cruel efficiency. Those from the horse seized key positions, while the returning army poured through the gates. Priam watched his city burn. The palace shook with the roar of collapsing roofs and dying dreams. He fled to an inner altar, hoping the gods might spare him sacred ground. Neoptolemus found him there, Achilles' son, with his father's fire and a harsher edge. Priam stood, unarmed, hands resting on the altar. In some tales he begged. In others he met death silently. Either way, Neoptolemus slew him at that very shrine. The last king of Troy fell where once he had begged for Hector's body. Elsewhere, horror spread in jagged threads. Andromache's child torn from her arms. Cassandra dragged from Athena's statue, her prophecies drowned by screams. Hecuba wandering through smoke, her world broken beyond repair. Menelaus found Helen in the chaos, still radiant, even in ash-streaked light, eyes heavy with history. For a moment, he raised his sword. Then he lowered it. He chose to take her home instead. By dawn, Troy was not a city, but a carcass. Walls cracked, temples defiled, houses gutted by flame. The Trojans who survived were captives. The Greeks had won, but the taste of victory was bitter. Chapter 43. The Weight of Victory. When dawn rose over the smoking ruins, the Greeks moved through the remnants of Troy like ghosts. Bodies lay everywhere, friend and foe alike. The smell of ash and blood hung thick in the air. They gathered treasure, herded captives, and prepared their ships for departure. They had won, yet victory felt strangely hollow. For every triumph, a shadow trailed close behind. The gods do not love hubris, nor do they let mortals leave tragedy untouched. Ajax the Lesser, who violated Athena's temple by dragging Cassandra from the goddess's very statue, would soon face divine punishment. Storms gathered on the horizon, black clouds thick as smoke. The Greeks would not sail home smoothly. Some would be blown off course. Some would be wrecked. Some would never see their homeland again. Odysseus, whose cunning had toppled Troy, would wander for years, tormented by monsters, enchantresses, and storms crafted by gods who resented his wit. Menelaus, reunited with Helen, found no peace in the memory of what her beauty had cost. Agamemnon, returning home triumphant, would find betrayal waiting for him in Mycenae. The survivors packed their plundered goods in silence, the thrill of conquest already fading into the weight of consequence. On the ruined shore, the tide came in. It washed over broken beams, shattered stones, scraps of charred wood. It cooled the ashes of pyres. It erased footprints from the sand, but nothing could erase Troy from memory. The Greeks boarded their ships, heavy with spoils and heavier with ghosts. They sailed away, leaving behind a smoking crater where a proud city once stood. Chapter 44. The Fate of the Survivors. Troy had fallen, but its people lived on in chains, in exile, in sorrow. The survivors were scattered like seeds cast upon harsh wind. Some became captives in Greek lands. Andromache, once wife of Troy's greatest hero, was given to Neoptolemus. She would live a life built from fragments of love and loss, raising Hector's son no more. Hecuba's grief twisted into despair as she was dragged into slavery, her royal dignity now nothing but memory. Cassandra went with Agamemnon, still cursed with visions no one would heed. She foresaw more blood, more ruin, but her warnings, like always, fell on closed ears. Others escaped the burning city. Aeneas, carrying his father Anchises upon his back and leading his young son by the hand, fled through smoke and fire. Guided by omens and destiny, he led a small band of survivors into the wilderness. In time, his descendants would build new cities. Empires would rise from the seed of Troy's ruin. Even as the flames devoured their home, the story stretched forward threads spinning into futures no one on the battlefield could imagine. Loss, once vast enough, does not end. It echoes, and the Trojans' echoes stretched across oceans and centuries. Those who had once lived behind shining walls were now wanderers, slaves, or legends. But in every corner of the world they touched, a fragment of Troy endured. Chapter 45: Echoes and Aftermath. Years later, bards in smoky halls sang of the Trojan War. They sang of Achilles' terrible brilliance, of Hector's noble courage, of Odysseus' cunning, of Priam's heart-breaking plea, of Troy burning against the night sky. Kings listened, wine warming their blood, and felt both awe and dread. Mothers held their children tighter, hearing of the fallen and fearing the eternal hunger of war. For the soldiers who had marched to Troy, the war never fully ended. Odysseus carried shadows in his eyes long after he returned to Ithaca. Menelaus lived beside Helen in uneasy quiet, the weight of tragedy housed in their shared silence. Neoptolemus bore guilt, heavier than his weapons. He had killed a king upon a sacred altar. Philoctetes returned with his bow, and old pain, the wound in his foot, matched by wounds in his memory. Even the gods returned to their feasts on Olympus, watching mortal smoke carry the scent of destruction upward. They had played their games, insults avenged, favors granted, favorites protected or sacrificed. Mortals had obeyed, resisted, suffered, loved, killed, and died beneath their whims. Yet the story remained. Long after bodies decayed, after cities fell, after kings died and kingdoms changed hands, the tale persisted, kept alive in song and story. For some battles never truly end. They become myths. Chapter 46: The Long View. What was the Trojan War in the end? A love story twisted into a war story. A quarrel among gods thrown into mortal lives. A chronicle of courage and folly, loyalty and pride. It proved how one choice, a golden apple tossed in spite, could ripple outward through decades and nations. How one promise and oath to protect a marriage could bind thousands of men to fate they did not foresee. How one act of compassion, Achilles returning Hector's body, Priam risking himself for his son, could shine even against a backdrop of cruelty. The war began with a wedding and a gift. It ended with a horse and a fire. Between these two symbols lay 10 years of the full human spectrum. Love and hate, bravery and cowardice, rage and tenderness, wisdom and folly, revenge, grief, honor, mercy. The walls of Troy fell. But the story of Troy did not. It lived on, carried in epic poems, whispered by storytellers beside hearth-fires, carved into the memory of civilizations that rose and fell long after the sand covered the ruins. And perhaps that is Troy's final strange victory. Its world burned, its people scattered, but its story proved immortal. In every retelling, its heroes breathe again. In every song, its tragedies weep anew. And in every listener, the war stirs fresh questions about fate, pride, love, and what it truly means to win or lose. Epilogue: The Quiet After. Imagine standing years later on the same shore where the Greek ships once gathered. The sand is smooth now. Grass grows where bodies once fell. The sea murmurs softly, waves rolling in and out with the same ancient patience they had before any hero walked the earth. If you close your eyes, you might think you hear echoes, the clatter of bronze, a warrior shouting another's name, a father weeping over a fallen son. But it is only the wind, only the sea. The war is long over. The heroes are gone. The city that burned is now a memory softened by time. Somewhere far away, a child hears the name Achilles for the first time and asks who he was. A storyteller begins. Long ago, before the first spear flew beneath the walls of Troy. And the Trojan War lives again, not in blood, but in words. Not in fire, but in memory. Not in victory or defeat, but in what endures. This is the true resolution. Not who won, not who died, but what humanity chooses to remember.